A good Tuesday, everybody, and welcome to the Volquest podcast. I'm Eric Kane with Burn Hubs, Rob Lewis, and Austin Price. Big week coming up, of course, Tennessee. Just days removed from a 44-6 win over Kentucky, and now the showdown begins. Number one, Georgia hosting number 2 Tennessee. Of course, that's the AP poll. A big week coming up. We got you covered right here on Volquest.com. Still only $1 for 1 year. If you haven't joined us, encourage you to do so, inviting all Tennessee fans $1 for 1 year over at Volquest.com. And thank you so much for watching us on YouTube as well. If you're watching this video, hit that like button. Let's get it to 500 likes. And if you haven't already, let's go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Guys, big week for Tennessee. But before we get into too much Georgia, let's look back at Kentucky. All of us kind of had the predictions, Tennessee scoring around 40, 45 points or whatnot.
Oh, let's go ahead, Eric. Jump on in here. Hubs was the sourpuss of the group. He had the least scoring margin. He doesn't believe. Rob Lewis is the only one who believes in the Vols. He had it as a blowout. Go ahead, continue on, Eric.
But you've saw it now, so now you believe it, right?
Somebody hit me up on my way to the interview area after the game, and he was very nice. I don't remember the gentleman's name. He goes, "Dude, man, at some point you're going to have to believe in this team. Like they're good. You do realize that?" And I'm like, "I picked them to win." He goes, "Yeah, but not by much." And I said, "Did you really think they're going to hold Kentucky to 6 points?" And he kind of smiled and said, "Well, maybe not, but I was never worried about this game. You tried to sell everybody, and you tried to make everybody nervous all week long, and for no reason, because they had no chance." And he was right, and I was wrong.
Well, then the Vols sure have no chance against the mighty Dogs this week. Then, in your mind, Hubber, I mean, it's what 50-7 Georgia. What do you got?
Oh no, we're not there. Did you really think that Tim Banks' defense was going to hold Kentucky to 6?
No, I said that after the game, but I also legitimately thought that Tennessee could win the game like 55-20. Like I thought they would give up 3 touchdowns. Yes, I mean, anybody that says they saw that Kentucky was only going to get 6 points is lying. Period. But I think a lot of people saw Tennessee in a runaway. They just thought they would score more than they did, and they left 2 or 3 touchdowns out there.
Yeah, Rob, I mean, that's the story, right? It's Tennessee defense. Hendon Hooker looked great. Jalen Hyatt broke a record. There's a lot to celebrate on the offensive end, but we've seen that. I mean, Tennessee's been a good offensive team. Tennessee is a good offensive team. Tennessee's not the best defensive team, but on Saturday night against a guy that you love in Will Levis, Tennessee was really good.
Jesus. Hey, the surprising part was what they did, in the secondary. Because, I mean, going into that, I mean, they had given up just some enormous numbers. I mean, and not just to Bryce Young, which is understandable, but Anthony Richardson has a career day that he'll never sniff again against an SEC team. Jaden Daniels, 300 yards. Admittedly, those teams were playing from behind a lot of the day, so they were throwing a lot. But still, for them to come up with 3 interceptions from, on a day when they were banged up in the secondary, didn't have everybody available, held Levis to 98 yards passing, 205 total offensive yards for Kentucky. I was really impressed with the defense. I mean, and like you just said, I mean, the offense, I mean, they could have come as close to 60 as they did 40. I mean, they get 2 turnovers where they start on Kentucky's end of the field, don't get any points out of it. So I was really impressed with the defense. And I'm not trying to make Kentucky into some offensive juggernaut. They're not. But, I mean, Tennessee took them out of any and everything that they wanted to do in that game.
Hey, look, the real MVP Saturday, Rob Lewis, who started his day in Frisco, Texas, and ended it in the friendly confines of the Neyland Stadium.
I was trying to help him out after the game by writing a story post-game, but he's still got its 2 stories out there, too. I mean, there's not a harder worker in all the industry than Rob Lewis.
I would not go that far, but, you got to suck it up when you're covering the number 2 team in the country.
AP, it's something Brett and I spoke on the Rocky Top Rewind, and there's no wrong answer here. My biggest takeaway defensively was that secondary, but up front, I mean, it's all tied together. Deshaun Terry, Amari Thomas, Byron Young. I mean, they played a really, really good game, really good in eliminating the run outside of that one drive for Chris Rodriguez, who was a bit banged up, but really was a non-factor in the game.
Yeah. Tennessee did a phenomenal job. They've done a phenomenal job all year at stopping the run. Top 10 nationally. They take a lot of pride in it. Rodney's got that rotation playing really, really well. They're playing great complementary football. Doesn't matter who he rotates in, Garland, Eason, Terry, Omari Thomas. By the way, credit, I don't know who in UT, whether it's Sports Info or Creative, whoever it was that did the the put it in reverse Terry tweet. I didn't see that at first, and then when I was like, wait a minute, I'm like, that is the most creative thing I've read in a while. Like that was so good, and the responses to it were even better with the gifs. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. The defensive line just continues to just play at an extremely high level, and you have to be impressed by just kind of different. Again, the whole team, man, just different guys stepping up all the time, but specifically that D lineman, DJ Terry. Stepping up, having a really nice game against Kentucky. And Tennessee will need all those guys to be really good Saturday against Georgia. At the end of the day, Georgia wants to do two things. They want to run the football, and they want to work the ball to the tight ends. And, if Tennessee can kind of neutralize the tight ends, then that'd be great.
Rob, it's interesting. I think you had this in your 3-2-1, and I think I made reference to it as well, and maybe my 10 things. When you look at this team, that the most impressive part is the continued growth of individuals. And that just speaks to a well-coached, developed football team from a fundamental standpoint. It's kind of feels like there's a kind of a new guy every week or two that seems to show up. Offensively, it's been the emergence and the growth of a Princeton fan in this offense. And then defensively, it's kind of been some new guys here and there along the way, which speaks to the volumes of the kids' commitments to work, but also speaks to the volumes of what this coaching staff's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's been no more maligned unit on this team, and maybe in the SEC, the Tennessee secondary, and they're down 2 starters, and they 2 guys. Danico Slaughter's playing at corner, which he's never done before in a game. Has a great game, makes a great interception. Brandon Turnage has been in and out of the lineup, can't get any traction. Great game, interception. And offensively, we're talking about guys getting better, but I mean, guys that we thought were going to be good, like Jalen Hyatt and Darnell Wright, have been great. I mean, you've had some guys, come up from out of nowhere to make plays, but then guys who were just, you thought they would be a piece of the puzzle, be contributors, have exceeded, any but the wildest expectations. And yeah, you can just point to all kinds of spots on the field like that guy's better, that guy's better, that guy's better. I mean, you talked about DJ Terry, we talked about Amari Thomas, Jalen Wright, Ramel Keaton. I mean, you can just go on and on down the list. And like you say, but it's a credit to the players, but also to the way that they get coached and the way they're willing to be coached.
I think something too. Tennessee, that was a fantastic game defensively. Of course, I don't think anybody, like we said, expected to give up 205 total yards of offense. That's what Tennessee gave up to Kentucky in that football game in 6 points. So a job well done there. The challenge is going to be much greater this week, of course. But offensively, I felt like at points in times, pretty much almost the entire game, outside of a few drives where Tennessee really kind of hurt itself, could do whatever it wanted to, Brent. I mean, Tennessee, Josh Heupel and Alex Golesh, they continue to work those matchups. They find what they want. You said it earlier on the Rocky Top Rewind that tandems has been used since the 1800s in football, but now, you can't figure out how to stop it with Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman out there. I mean, he was wide open and he had a big game. And now the single season touchdown reception leader with 14 in Tennessee program history. And there's a couple games left.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they've found some things. This slot receiver in this offense, I think, is always going to be highly productive, particularly if they can run. They've got a chance to put up big numbers, and we're seeing Jalen Hyatt. To me, the lost thing about this offense's evolution from year 1 to year 2 is not the growth of Hendon Hooker, although he's gotten a lot better. It's not Jalen Hyatt, who I thought at one point might transfer last year. It's what this offensive front's doing. And it's their ability to run the ball from the offensive through the running backs, but because of the offensive line. I'm going to beat this stat just because I looked it up and I like it. But, Tennessee doesn't run for 100 yards against Pittsburgh, averages a little over 2 yards a carry. Then they get into SEC play and it's 4.99 yards a carry. Rob, that changes how teams can play Tennessee's offense, because now you're having to make choices. If Tennessee can run the football with any kind of effectiveness against Georgia, which they couldn't do a year ago, it changes how Kirby Smart has to play Tennessee offensively. Because they've been able to run the ball, Nick Saban and these other defenses can't do what they want to do by just, handling the run game with 4 guys up front or 5 guys up front. That, to me, that's been the biggest part of why this offense is at an explosive factor we haven't seen them at to this point.
Yeah, and I mean, they put up some offensive number. I mean, some rushing yards last year too, Hubbard. But a lot of that was they just absolutely victimized Missouri and victimized South Carolina. I mean, this year they're doing it against good defenses. I mean, Kentucky, Alabama, LSU. all pretty good run defenses. In fact, Alabama was number one in the conference when Tennessee played them, and Tennessee is not just run the ball effectively. I mean, they've run it really well. I mean, 180 yards plus against Alabama, almost 5 yards a carry. It's going to be that kind of challenge this week against Georgia. But we talk about it all the time. Without the passing game's sexy. It's so fun to talk about Hooker to Hyatt and all the numbers they're putting up. But if defenses aren't having to play Tennessee honest, which they are because of the way they're able to run the football, then the passing game gets much, much harder. And in SEC play, we'll have to get Kane to go back and look this stat up. Tennessee's converting 49% on third down in SEC against SEC defenses, and that's a big fat number. And that's as we say, when you start piling up first downs, converting third like that, then that's when the tempo really starts to wear on people. And the tempo gave Kentucky some problems the other night.
Yeah, no doubt. And Austin, I think too. I mean, Darnell Wright deservingly is getting a ton of praise. He plays really well. I think there's something to Cooper Mays being in the lineup each and every week. Remember, he missed 3 games last year, 4 games, kind of nursed that ankle all season long. They're at a different pace. They seem to be at a better cohesion, less missed and bust assignments because he's at the center position. I think that's probably another something about this team that's not been discussed a whole lot about this offensive line.
No, you're exactly right. And, Jerome Carvin is just so steady at guard. Spraggins has been really good at guard. Darnell just is playing his way into a first-round draft pick. And so, when you think about it, all that, there was a lot of angst going into that LSU game, right? Once you found out like the night before that, Mincy's not playing, J.J. Crawford's going to get this is going to be his game. A lot of angst. And J.J. Crawford has come in and done really, really well. I mean, he is really good in run blocking. He's going to continue to get better in pass blocking. I think that's part of the reason Tennessee's able to run the ball pretty effectively too is, you go back, start with LSU. I mean, he's been a key part, of a lot of those SEC games at that left tackle spot, and that's where he's comfortable as far as like being able to run block. So, Cooper kind of starts everything at that center position. His health this year has proved to be huge, as you just pointed out. But I think it's just kind of kept everybody, instead of moving people around and you kind of get a little bit weaker at every spot, you're really just kind of strong everywhere. And that's why this offensive line has held up so well. But, Cooper, has done a really, really, really good job. He's smart, and he understands the offense. And again, he's got that Mays toughness as well.
And because of that good play from Cooper Mays in that offensive line, Hendon Hooker had a Hendon Hooker football game, 4 total touchdowns, completed 76% of his passes against the Kentucky defense. That was top 10, top 15 scoring and total defense in the country, 245. And I like, Brent, what they did with the wide receivers. Went after Cedric Tillman, who made his comeback, got him involved active early, didn't play him a snap in the second half. Jalen Hyatt did Jalen Hyatt things, but Brew McCoy led the team in targets. They continued to try to get Brew McCoy involved as much as they possibly could. I liked what I saw from spreading the wealth and kind of their game plan and how to manage Cedric Tillman in that receiving game against Kentucky, knowing that you're going to need him against Georgia.
Yeah, no doubt. And I thought it was important to get him active early, get him a couple of catches early and get him going. It's kind of like bringing a running back, get tackled, let him get lathered up a little bit and get settled in. I thought that was smart. Here's the crazy thing to me, though, when you mentioned Hendon Hooker completed 76% of his throws. He missed Brew McCoy over the middle on a slant about 8 feet over his head, and he was open. And then there was one in the dirt, Rob, that was open. So a 76% completion percentage, a couple more touchdown throws, 3 more touchdown throws. But you're like, yeah, Hendon left some stuff out there, which is crazy to think where this Tennessee offense and where Hendon Hooker is right now.
Well, and I'll tell you what else is crazy to think is like the stuff. I mean, there's 1 or 2 of those every game. And I think the reason they're so noticeable is that they're examples of where guys are just wide open. It wouldn't look like, man, he really missed that one if there had been a defender within 5 yards of the guy. And we talk about it all the time, but how, scheming people open and, what Heupel does with this offense, but for it still be happening 8 games into the season, Jalen Hyatt just gets completely naked on the first drive of the game. And Nick Saban, Mark Stoops, I mean, they sound like they're reading from the same script. Well, they didn't do anything we didn't practice, or they didn't do anything that surprised us. But apparently the players are still getting surprised with 8 games to look at on tape. And I think that's a tribute to this staff. And, I don't know what all kind of little tweaks and they're doing to change things up, but that defensive backs are getting hammered on what, here's the stack. Here's what they're going to do. Here's what you got to, and it just keeps working and keeps working and keeps working every week.
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't practice having an outside linebacker running with Jalen Hyatt down the sideline. That is because there was a misassignment.
How I imagine it is, the kids feel like they're still going through walkthrough. When the linebacker got matched up with him on that first bust, I mean, he just quit. Like, he didn't even there was no attempt to run. It's like, just go right to the sideline. It's almost what it feels like. It's like, hey guys, we're gonna walk through what they're gonna do here. They're walking through, and Tennessee's actually really running the play.
Yeah, like he was trying to pass it off, but no one was over there, obviously, because the safety bit with Tillman there. The challenge now is going to get a whole lot steeper. Georgia, number 1, reigning national champions, and all that. And we can talk resumes and strength of schedule and ranked wins and all that. That's a conversation maybe for later today and throughout this week. But Georgia's a good football team. And when you look at that defense that lost, what was it, Rob? 5 first-round draft picks a season ago, something like that?
And 7 starters overall?
Yeah. They lost some power defensively. Still a good defense. But that offense is pretty dynamic in what it can do, especially at the tight end position with All-American Brock Bowers. Josh Heupel asked about Brock Bowers and the challenge for the defense in Monday's press conference. Here's what Josh Heupel had to say on that.
Yeah, that matchup changes, because of where they position him. They do a great job of moving him around. You have to identify him in all the different formations that you're going to get from them. You got to have great eye discipline, too, because of the play-action pass and their ability to uniquely get those guys, him in particular, into situations where they create grass for him. You got to be able to handle the run game too. All those things play off of that. So line of scrimmage will be vitally important in this, but you got to know where he's at all night long.
Brock Bowers, he is second on the team in receptions with 31. He leads the team with 547 yards through the air. He scored 3 touchdowns. He's also a football player, 3 rushing attempts, 3 touchdowns, 82 yards. Brock Bowers is going to be a challenge for Tennessee's linebackers and secondary. Brent Hubbs are going to have to be on him.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see what Tennessee does schematically. How do they do it? Are they going to bracket him? Do they isolate? Do they play a Danico Slaughter on him? Is it Tamarian McDonald? How do they adjust it? I think that's a real interesting matchup in this game, because Georgia's going to try to get him matched up in a bunch of different ways and do some things with him. But when he lines up out wide or split out from the line of scrimmage, what do they do? How does that matchup look, and how do they play in the secondary? I think Tim Banks and Willie Martinez, have some interesting decisions to make in the secondary to try to get that matchup to where it's a winnable matchup or a matchup that they can hold their own against. And what that looks like is going to be unique to see on Saturday. The other question is, what's Georgia do to counter that, right? I mean, if you put him in and you motion him out, how does that change things? So some real cat and mouse, I think, between Coach Monk and the offensive coordinator for Georgia and Tennessee's defensive coordinator, Tim Banks.
Yeah, I think so too. It'll be interesting to see. And if it's not Brock Bowers, not as explosive, of course, their best player hadn't played in a while, and Donnie Mitchell, but at the wide receiver position, not as explosive. Their second leading receiver is actually, their starting running back and Kenny McIntosh. So they throw to the backs, they throw to the tight ends. They got 2 tight ends, of course, Darnell Washington, the other one. It's going to be interesting, Austin, to see kind of how you counter, but what makes the whole thing go as well, and this is another thing we're going to hear from Josh Heupel here, is quarterback and Stetson Bennett, undervalued, underrated, and maybe the biggest part of his game that's underrated is his ability to extend plays and move with his feet. Here's Josh Heupel.
Yeah, confidence, from just the first time that he got on the field to who he is now, complete confidence, command in what they're doing offensively. He's got great playmakers around him, does a great job at distributing the ball I think he's undervalued in some respects with his feet. He's explosive, he's twitchy. When it's not right in the pocket, he extends plays. That can be him throwing on scrambles, but also him taking, tucking the ball and making plays. He made a couple against us last year that changed the game. You got to do a great job of bottling him up.
It's the same story, Austin, with Stetson Bennett. He doesn't look great from the eye test. On paper, sometimes it doesn't look that great, but he is good enough to make you pay, and he made Tennessee pay a couple times last year.
Yeah, and I think that's the key in this football game. We're going to talk all week about scoring points for Tennessee. Defensively, it's simply, when you get to Stetson Bennett, you've got to get him down. Like he's sneaky, he's sneaky athletic. He eludes and avoids. And he's not Bryce Young, right? But he's more mobile, than Will Levis was. So Tennessee's got to do a better job of wrapping up, not allowing him to kind of duck his head and slip out the backside, because he can make you pay. And he does a nice job of keeping his eyes up the field when he does get out of the pocket and break contain. So you just can't assume he's always going to run either. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's something you really have to watch if you're Tennessee this week is, when you get back there and you get pressure on Stetson Bennett, you need to figure out a way to get him on the ground.
Yeah, Rob, what is it about Stetson Bennett? I mean, because Tennessee's already played against Anthony Richardson. Tennessee's played against Bryce Young. Tennessee played against Jaden Daniels. Tennessee played against Football Jesus and Will Levis. Stetson Bennett doesn't scare you, but again, he's scared a lot of opposing defenses, and he's capable of doing it. He's got over 2,300 yards on the season already, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's not that great of a ratio already, but completing passes at 67%. What about Stetson Bennett is what Tennessee needs to worry about?
Man, he's just a tough little son of a gun, and I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. I spent all last year skeptical, making fun of him, thinking Georgia couldn't beat Alabama, certainly couldn't win it all with Stetson Bennett at quarterback, and he earned my respect, and maybe or maybe not cost me a couple of bucks with the way he played against Alabama with everything on the line. So I'm done doubting Stetson Bennett. I mean, I think the kid is legit. I mean, he's not an NFL prospect, but he is a very solid college quarterback. He's actually averaging more yards passing than Hendon Hooker this year, believe it or not. I mean, only 1 yard, but still. And to me, what Tennessee does against Bennett and Georgia's offense is the key, because I think Tennessee's going to score. I mean, Georgia may slow Tennessee down, but to me, slow down means Tennessee scores in the 30s. Georgia's offense, I mean, they average over 300 yards a game passing, 200 yards a game rushing. Tennessee's got it. I mean, they've got to find a way to keep Georgia from getting 40 plus. And if they do that, I think Tennessee can win the game.
Hey Hubbard, did he just say, I'm done doubting Stetson Bennett, and then in the next sentence say he's not a pro prospect?
That's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, no, I mean,
not at all.
I think here's the thing about Stetson Bennett, and I think this is what probably was lost in all of the, fact that he's not on draft boards and the fact that he doesn't have every measurable that you have. And coaches talk about this all the time. You're looking for this in recruiting. It's the competitive character. The guy's competitive as hell, okay? I mean, and you talk about, to me, what separates a Will Levis from Stetson Bennett, it's talent around him, but Stetson Bennett's, to me, more competitive than a Will Levis is. And I think it's Stetson Bennett's competitiveness that stems from the fact that he was doubted. He's been doubted from the get-go. He thrives off the fact that he's been doubted. And I think he's a terrific competitor. And I think that's why Stetson Bennett is still standing where he's standing as the starting quarterback, when everybody will tell you he's not the most talented, he's not the most gifted quarterback in Georgia's quarterback room, but he is their quarterback because of his competitiveness, and everybody recognizes that on the team and rallies around it. That's why Kirby Smart likes him. The guy's a winner. Simple fact of the matter. That's what he is.
A little bit over defensively for Georgia. You get Jalen Carter back, who played 20 snaps in the cocktail party, primarily used on third downs, a little bit of pass rushing situations. He'll probably get more snaps, but working his way back from injury. Get Jalen Carter back in the interior of the defensive line, but Austin potentially not going to have Nolan Smith. And when I say potentially, I mean, it looks like probably doubtful is how it was phrased on Monday. What a huge loss, losing your biggest pass rusher off that edge for Georgia.
Yeah, and that's a big win for Tennessee, because I do think Tennessee Because Nolan Smith's someone Tennessee would really have to account for on every play. They've had success against Will Anderson, B.J. Ojolari, but Nolan Smith is right there in that same type of, cut from that same cloth, really, really good coming off the edge. And if he can't go, it's not like that they're going to plug in some walk-on. They'll just roll out some other 4 or 5-star defensive end. They're just not as polished as Nolan Smith is. Nolan could have went pro. Didn't think that his draft prospects were as high as he could be, so he decided to come back. Smart kid, loves college experience. And so, I don't know if he's done for the year or not. They're talking about like a pectoral issue, but if it is, he had a really good career down there. But, really, I think that's a big win for Tennessee if he's not able to go Saturday. And again, Jalen Carter really, really good. But I think if you said, hey, Georgia's going to be without one or the other, I think, if you're Tennessee, you'd rather it be Nolan Smith. And Jalen Carter, again, really, really good.
Yeah, Nolan Smith, he leads the team in TFLs with 7, with sacks with 3. Brent's favorites stat out there. Well, first of all, we got to decide, is it quarterback pressures or quarterback hurries? Whichever it is, he has 16 of those on the season. He's a good player, Brent, and Georgia's going to miss him.
Yeah, I'd like to see how many of those hurries were listed by the home scorekeeper at home games versus what's going on the road, because you get that stat book, and on the road, I think Tennessee had 2 pressures against LSU on the road outside of their sacks, which we all know. So I think that stat's a bit misleading, but he is a good player, and he's allowed Georgia to be able to not have to blitz a bunch of people all the time because he's been able to get home as a part of their just regular base defense rush package. So I think that's a big factor there for Tennessee. I think that's a positive. And again, I just think this is a heavyweight fight. You can sit here and you can pick this, that, or the other. It's going to be in the line of scrimmage is where it starts. Can Tennessee run the football to have some balance? Can they keep Hendon Hooker upright? And on the flip side of things, can Tennessee not allow Georgia to run for 200 yards and get Georgia into some long yardage situations and maybe get after Stetson Bennett? I think it's the line of scrimmage, Austin.
I agree. I think this game comes down, and I don't know if you guys will agree with me here. I think it comes down to Tennessee's offensive line's ability to not get silly false starts because of the noise. And you go back to Saturday, when did Tennessee struggle offensively? When they had holding penalties by offensive linemen, holding penalties by receivers, false starts, anything like that where they got playing behind the sticks and they were playing it, 2nd and 25 or 3rd and 15 or any of that stuff. Like if they can avoid those, I think Rob's right. Tennessee's going to score points. It's just don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't have self-inflicted wounds. And I think that goes back to Georgia's, defensive pressure and how much does the offensive line just kind of hold up pre-snap. I think once the snap happens, I think they'll be okay, but not getting silly penalties that potentially put you playing behind the sticks.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Rob. When you look, no offense to the fine folks at Pittsburgh, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of the former Heinz Field. That was not exactly a rocking crowd. You didn't have to worry about, crowd noise and that deal. And Baton Rouge at noon, that crowd was sleepwalking, and then they fell back asleep after the fumble on the kickoff, and Tennessee jumped on them. So this is really Tennessee's first venture into what I would consider a hostile environment, and this will be as hostile as it gets. Tennessee's only, I think, 2,000 tickets is something like that. That's what Tennessee fans bought up in the preseason for this game. So there's not going to be a lot of orange in the stands. How Tennessee handles the road environment, really the first time in the road environment, is something to keep an eye on early in this game, Rob.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be rattled, but being rattled is not the same as, just not being able to hear the snap count and jumping off sides. I don't think they're going to be intimidated or anything like that, but there's just some, laws of physics where, the crowd is going to impact the game. And I think AP makes a great point. You go back to that second drive against Kentucky the other day. If Tennessee doesn't botch that with 3 penalties and 3 snaps, I feel they probably go up 14-0. It didn't matter, but if it
could matter Saturday though.
It could matter Saturday if you score on drive 1 and then drive 2 when you have a chance to build some momentum. You get two avoidable penalties. So I think the crowd will be a factor, but not from the sense that Tennessee's going to be shaking in their boots just from the fact that your communication is going to have to really be on point.
Last thing I want to hit on here, and Rob, I want to direct it to you because I already got the thoughts of Brent and Austin on the Rocky Top Rewind, but, feel free to jump back in. First time ever we're having this conversation since the college football playoffs have been a thing. Rankings, the first installment comes out tonight at 7 o'clock. Where do you believe Tennessee will be ranked? And do you think it'll be the right spot for Tennessee? I guess saying if you think they should be ranked number 1, but they won't be, kind of show your work.
I think they will be ranked number 2. I think they should be ranked number 1. And that's just, and Georgia might be better. I'm not saying they're not, but if you're just doing it on the body of work, Tennessee's wins are better. The win over Alabama is the best win that anybody has this season. They've beaten 4 of the ranked teams, 2 solid SEC teams, Kentucky and LSU. They absolutely ran them off the field. And outside of the little hiccup at Pittsburgh, they have played borderline brilliantly. Alabama was a close game, but that was always going to be. So I would rank Tennessee 1. I think they'll probably be 2. And I would bet it's Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, and Clemson. And I don't think Clemson is one of the top 4 at all, but they'll be there. I would bet.
We'll see what happens. That comes out tonight at 7 o'clock. And, of course, regardless of where Tennessee's ranked, you can settle it on the field at 3:30 between the hedges in Athens against Georgia. That's coming up on Saturday. We're going to talk about it all week long, break down the individual matchups, bring you the best coverage out there for Tennessee at Georgia. It's going to be number 1 versus number 2. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. You can catch up with all of our work and stay dialed in for Tennessee, Georgia over at Volquest.com. Deal's going on right now. Won't be going on for much longer, but it's $1 for 1 year. So get it while it's hot. Again, that's $1 for 1 year. And thank you so much for watching us on YouTube as well. If you're watching, please subscribe if you haven't already and hit that like button. Let's get this video up to 500 likes here for the Volquest podcast. For Brent Hubbs, Rob Lewis, Austin Price, I am Eric Kane. We'll be back on Thursday for the mailbag edition of this podcast. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.